All right, perfect. Welcome everybody to the Digital Inclusion 101 webinar. We have these bi-monthly, so every other month. And if you have any new team members on your team in the next other month or so, or even in the future, feel free to invite them to this. And let's go ahead and get started. So this is the agenda. First, we'll be covering what NDIA stands for, the work that the National Digital Inclusion Alliance does. And then we'll jump right into definitions so that y'all have a good foundation of what digital inclusion terms are. After that, we'll do a fun Jamboard activity where we get to examine what are the barriers to digital inclusion. And then afterwards, we'll talk about the key solutions and then dive into learning more about the Digital Navigator program, digital inclusion coalitions, and what are some policy updates that are happening. All right, so since I'm talking, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Hi, my name is Pamela, pronoun she, they, and I reside in Chicago. I am the Training and Community Engagement Manager with NDIA. I'll pass it over to Lo.
Hey y'all, my name's Lo Smith. I'm a senior programs manager with NDIA. I do a little bit of everything, but a big chunk of that has been the digital navigators. I'm located in Baltimore, Maryland, and my pronouns are they, them. Handing it off to Sion.
Hi everyone, I'm Sion Tesfaye. I'm a senior research and policy manager at NDIA.
Awesome. And so NDIA, to add to your alphabet soup, for those who are new into this digital inclusion moment, I'm sure you are hearing a lot of letters kind of compiled together. And so hopefully we can uncompile them for you. And one of them, I'm sure, is NDIA. So NDIA, we stand for the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and we advocate digital equity by supporting community programs and equipping policymakers to act. We are a nonprofit representing and serving more than 1,200 US organizations in 49 states and throughout DC and Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. We're also very happy that we have 12 tribal partners working alongside, doing amazing work in bringing connectivity and digital inclusion in Indian country. And we represent organizations that work towards affordable broadband, access to devices, digital skills training, and support. And here at NDIA, we facilitate knowledge sharing forums, such as our monthly community calls, which we actually have one coming up this Friday. We also have exclusive working group meetings, and we have our very thriving, our very bustling NDIA listserv. So what we do with all of these resources is we listen and we learn from our community. We draw major themes of what we're hearing on the ground, and then we align our advocacy efforts with that. So the resources that we provide our community are all free, and we will be sharing throughout the presentation all of the free resources that are related to the topics that we are talking about. And we do actually have compiled a handy document where you can see all of the resources that we shared in this presentation. Again, reminder, you will have the recording of this presentation as well as the presentation slides that have links in them as well, but here's just another resource for you. Here's a QR code. So if you are unfamiliar with the QR code, what you do is you open your camera app on your phone and you just kind of point your camera towards the QR code. Once your camera is able to identify and scan the code, a link will show up on your screen, and then you should be able to click on that link on your phone, and then it'll automatically send you to the document. And I think one of our team members will share the link to the slides, or I'm sorry, we'll share the link to this resource document in the chat. All right. So definitions. We're going to define some key terms when talking about digital inclusion. Some of these terms are used interchangeably, but they mean specific things. So first and foremost is digital equity, right? This is the goal. This is the condition in which all individuals and communities have the information technology to participate online in the way that they want to, right? It is what we are working towards, where every member in our community can get connected to the internet with a strong internet connection that is affordable, as well as utilize the internet with the skills and utilize it the way that they want to. right? So participation can look like knowing how to access the App Store on your phone or device and download it so that you can get the most updated mobile health app and access your doctor remotely. It can be scheduling appointments with your therapist or with your counselor or with your doctor online. It can be something like simply streaming Netflix or Amazon Prime or what have you, or it can be even something more intense, like being able to get on the internet, learn remotely, go work remotely, as well as participate in civic organizations and be part of the political economy. So why equity? Why digital equity, and why not equality? I'm sure some of you have seen an image similar to this. So the left represents equality, and in both pictures, there are the same amount of books. There are 6 books in the picture on the left, 6 books in the picture on the right, and right represents equity. And so as you can see, the difference here is that with equality, everybody is getting the same amount of resources. Every person is getting 3 books to stand on. However, when you look at these images, not everybody needs 3 books in order to get what they need to do, right? In order to use their computer or their device properly. The second person is really perfect at the 3 books mark. It looks like the person to the farthest right needs maybe a little bit more, and the person on the farthest left, those resources are just being wasted and they might have different needs. Now, equity on the right hand is we are still having the same amount of resources, but we are distributing it in a more equitable way. We are hearing from our community members and the different sub-communities and identities that exist within our city, within our locality, and we know what their unique needs are, and then we adjust appropriately. So with equity, we always want to make sure that we have this we center equity when we are doing digital inclusion work, so that we are not wasting our time, we are not wasting our resources, and we are not wasting our community members' time because they might need more accessibility needs or different type of needs as opposed to what we are providing them. All right. And then digital inclusion, this is the work, right? These are the activities that get us to reach digital equity in our communities. So that is providing digital skills trainings, that is access to affordable devices, access to high-speed internet, and then having a individual or a community to access those resources if you don't have them, or have a point person to go to help you get connected to all of those resources in your community. We will talk more about what those activities look like in detail very shortly. And then, of course, the digital divide. This is kind of why we're in the situation right now, right? It's the issue. It's the gap between those who have affordable access, skills, and support to effectively engage online and those who do not. And the digital divide disproportionately affects those who are already impacted by oppressive systems like racism, classism, age discrimination, ableism, and much more. All right, so here at NDIA, we love Jamboard. We love engaging activities. So there will be a link in the chat to a Jamboard activity. And if you are not familiar with Jamboard, it is a virtual whiteboard where you can add sticky notes and draw, but right now we're gonna be focusing on adding sticky notes. So when you click on that link and you're on Jamboard, to add a sticky note, you're going to look at the left module and the 4th icon down. You click on that, you're able to write something on the sticky note and then press save, and it'll automatically be posted. And you can put unlimited amount of sticky notes on there. So let's all click on that link, and I will pause my screen share so I can share my screen with the Jamboard and continue on. So you should all be able to see the Jamboard on my screen right now. And the question I want y'all to reflect on is, what prevents people in your community from consistently connecting to the internet and using it effectively? I'll give y'all a few moments. And if you are having any troubles with accessing the Jamboard, or you're not able to put a post-it note, that is totally fine. You can still participate by putting your answers in the chat. All right. I like someone's thumbs up. We love a thumbs up or a +1 to support and validate what somebody wrote. All right, so let me read some of the stuff that y'all put here. So I'm seeing a lot of the word cost come up. Cost is a very huge barrier in terms of even getting connected online, right? Because it is expensive to start up a new getting internet with a new internet service provider if you are moving. Devices can be super expensive. Even phones are super expensive. They're even more expensive than some laptops at this point. So cost is a huge barrier. Lack of knowledge. Yes, lack of knowledge. There's so much there in terms of not having the digital skills to utilize your device and explore the internet safely. Also lack of knowledge on the fact that there are, government programs out there that can help reduce your cost of the internet, your internet monthly bill, and the programs that are out there that exist that can allow you to, for example, attend a digital skills training class, and then at the end you get a Google Chromebook, right? Like there's so many things that lack of knowledge there can encompass. Tech intimidation and lack of confidence. Thank you to whoever wrote that. It can be very intimidating with all of the constant new updates with technology. And on top of that, things constantly changing and growing with the internet. It can be super intimidating and frustrating. And somebody might even think, what is even the point of learning how to, navigate the internet and navigate the device, because it's just constantly growing and I already feel like I'm behind and I haven't even started yet, right? So if somebody's already overwhelmed there, what is going to be the incentive for them to even considering having internet connection at their home? Lori says they have to stop organizing notes. We appreciate those who are organizing the notes, because you guys are the real MVP helping this all look more organized and not discombobulated. So thank you. Somebody put geography. Yes, there are areas like rural communities, tribal communities where there is no broadband infrastructure. So how can you even get connected to the internet at your own home if there is no infrastructure there, right? Folks have to drive to their nearest library or McDonald's or location where they provide that free internet. Somebody wrote language. Thank you for putting language on there, because that is a barrier. If there are digital skills trainings available, or there is a program that can help you learn about the different devices, or learn about the different internet service providers and programs that are available to you, but they don't speak your language, that's going to be really difficult. Or if that specific person who's helping you does not know how to interact with somebody who is coming from a different language or a different culture, and they don't know how, or don't have the patience to get on Language Line and work with an interpreter to help you, right? Speed, especially upload. Yes, broadband infrastructure could exist. You might have the device, but if the speed is slow and it's not matching the needs that you have, for example, if you are working and you're doing a webinar presentation, right? But your internet is slow, that's going to be, that could potentially cost you a job there, because they might think like, oh, you are not, you don't have the things necessary to complete your work. All right, so kind of moving back onto the presentation, I'm going to pause my screen share and then go back to the slides. I just want to thank you all for participating in that. You all seem very in tune with your community, and that's really great. I'm going to resume my screen sharing. David just shared in the chat that Zoom now has closed captioning and real-time translation in multiple languages. Thanks, David, for sharing that. That's really great. And yes, mind-blowing. Technology is constantly improving, which is great. Accessibility features are constantly improving. And hopefully this means that we can provide digital skills training to more members in our community. All right. So digital redlining. Digital redlining is discrimination by internet service providers, or ISPs, in deployment, maintenance, upgrade, or delivery of services. So the map on the right, in 2017, NDIA, alongside a organization called Connect Your Community, conducted a mapping analysis of the FCC broadband availability in Cleveland. And we found that AT&T systemically discriminated against lower income Cleveland neighborhoods in its deployment of home internet and broadband over the past decade. So that is one of the factors that contribute to the digital divide, is this digital redlining. So we're going to cover just some key barriers, which we have kind of briefly talked about, and a lot of you had already put into the Jamboard. But with broadband, right? So a lot of people were writing cost. It's unaffordable. Even the equipment to have it can be really confusing, overwhelming, and very expensive. Having a router, a modem, those type of things, getting those things installed, can be very pricey and can be out of budget. For low-income communities, anything even $10 out of budget is already too much. And if it's getting there, then that means that that family will not have connectivity. Unreliable service. So, you know, the internet connection goes out when the weather isn't, you know, whether it's raining or snowing or there's a blizzard, that's going to affect somebody to be able to, you know, get connected and do what they need online. When it comes to devices, another barrier is, again, cost. Again, devices can be very expensive nowadays. So it's, if a community member doesn't know that there are programs out there that can help reduce that cost, or that there are programs out there that can help you find refurbished and good quality devices, then they're going to think that they might not have access. But, you know, libraries exist, community programs exist that you can utilize those devices for free. Outdated software, that's another huge issue. Prior to working with NDIA, and once the pandemic started, I was working in a domestic violence shelter. So we all kind of saw everything shift from being in person to remote. And one thing that didn't really change was those court dates. So, right, the court dates stayed the same, but it was virtual. So all of our clients, we were scrambling to figure out, do you have connection at home? Do you have a device at home? Okay, cool, you do? Great. We found out that some of those devices have not been touched and they're very outdated. So we had to see if Zoom was even compatible with that device. If they had a device, is there a webcam? You know, things like that. So you might have access to a device, that is step one, but if it's not matching the needs, then that's going to be a barrier still. And then lastly is digital skills. So having those limited digital skills, not knowing how to navigate your computer, your desktop, your laptop, and then having those trainings not be accessible to you, whether that is physical accessibility, or the trainers are not accommodating for neurodivergency, or they're not accessible in terms of language or even culture, right? Fear and shame. Somebody talked about feeling overwhelmed about technology growing, and that can be, that lack of confidence can be enough of a barrier to stop, or even that fear of, I'm not safe to go online because I'm scared my data is just going to be leaked everywhere. There are ways to navigate the internet in a safe way. Just like driving, there's always a risk with anything you do. It's just about learning what are those safety precautions, right? So maybe not having your password be your birthday or 123456, you know, things like that can help a long way in terms of protecting your information. And then, yeah, privacy concerns, right? So, now that we have identified what are those barriers, we can easily, and I say easily very lightly, identify what those solutions are. So, right, so it's access to affordable and high quality broadband, access to appropriate and affordable devices, and also the ability to access digital literacy trainings. So I'll pass it over to Lo.
Awesome, thank you. I always get the exciting part where I get to talk about the solutions after Pamela takes us through the real world experiences of all the problems. So let's get started with affordable and low cost broadband. A quick note on the terminology I was using there. I say affordable and low cost because those are two different things. Affordable is something that we can all sort of choose our own method for, but low cost is all of us agreeing this is affordable, this is cheap, we can handle it. So now that I've talked about those two things, let's talk about broadband. I think for many of us who got started in digital inclusion, we were talking about broadband, but we were not always explaining what it is. Broadband is just that transmission of the data through a high-speed internet connection, and high speed is the key. I want to highlight that in 2015, the FCC sort of set that definition for what a high-speed internet connection was. They set a minimum. They said it was 25 megabits per second for downloading and 3 megabits per second for uploading. For those of us who are on Zoom right now, we know that that is not enough for us to even maintain this call. Also, think about who you were in 2015 and whether or not that person would still be doing the same work that you're doing today. So I think we can all agree that the minimum that was set by the FCC in 2015 is not quite up to standard to do the work that we need it to today. So something that we think about when we think about internet speed, which leads me to a trivia question. Next slide. Since I think I may have just given you a hint, I would like to know if we can approximate, you're allowed to guess, how much download speed a family of 4 would need if they have 5 devices connected to the internet and 2 people working from home and somebody, maybe everybody, is streaming videos in HD. So I'd love to see in the chat if y'all want to throw in some guesses. Do we think it's going to be 36 megabits per second, 85 megabits per second, 63 megabits per second, or 100? All right, I've got some guesses. I've got a bunch coming in for 100. So let's do a big reveal. Next slide. For those of you who guessed 100 megabits per second, you were correct. I think many of us have taken a look at our internet bills recently and our internet speeds and tried to figure out how am I going to get the most sort of speed for the least amount of money, which is a question I think we've all been asking ourselves for a pretty long time. Next slide. Our broadband adoption is just about our daily access to the internet and making sure that everybody is going to be able to get the speeds, the quality, and the capacity necessary to do whatever they need to do. As Pamela and I both experienced, sometimes we've got unstable internet connections and we have to reach for that Ethernet cord because we have to be able to do what we need to do to be able to support our digital inclusion communities. Also, in that broadband adoption is having the skills necessary to participate online and having that personal device and that secure network to do so. So just because there is internet going to you right there and then in your home or wherever you are, if you don't have the other elements to it, you're not going to be able to actively engage online. One of my favorite things when I'm talking to my friends who work in rural areas is I always say cows are not going to enjoy having Google Fiber or fiber in their area. We are, and we are the ones who need to have all of the other pieces to be able to engage with it. However, there is a program to buy a cow an iPad. I'd like to participate in it just because I feel like it would make good TikTok content. Complete sidebar. But also thinking about some of the other pieces of what it means to have broadband in a community. Next slide. We've seen that broadband is also an option to bring sovereignty and support to specific communities, such as our tribes who are owning and operating their own internet infrastructure. It keeps the power and the data, which is really critical within tribal communities. We've also seen this within some community ISPs, and it bolsters the economic power. When we're seeing the need to be able to keep internet infrastructure within our communities, it means a lot, both to our communities as a whole and also to our digital communities. So making sure that everyone is able to be connected. Next slide. I do have another trivia question for you about connected communities. I would like to know if you can tell me what city was ranked the best work from home city in 2021 by PC Mag. Specifically, I would like to highlight that they were ranking this based on the internet, not just the cities where it is fun to work from home. So I'd like to see some quick guesses in the chat. And I think I have some people guessing. We've got Chattanooga. We have somebody guessing San Antonio. We've got some more Chattanoogas. We've got more New York, San Francisco. Somebody's family's in Chattanooga. So I'm hoping that they are going to be able to answer well. We've got San Antonio, more San Antonios, more New York. All right, let's do the big reveal. So for Jamie, whose family is in Chattanooga, I hope you knew that Chattanooga is called Gig City. It is the first city in the US to roll out citywide fiber, and they did that way back in 2010, when I think most of us were just struggling to have options with our internet service providers and figuring out if we were going to be able to get it installed in our homes. Since then, in August 2020, they were able to connect all of the students to free high-speed internet. Anybody who had free or reduced lunch within the city, they were able to get online with their homes for free, which is amazing and an absolute game changer. So shout out to Chattanooga. You guys have been doing fantastic work for over a decade now. We really love to see that. If you're looking for more resources, on the next page, you can take a look at some of our details on the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is specifically a program that many of us are either working in or have heard quite a bit about. It is a internet service program from the federal government that provides discounts for home internet as well as a discount off of a device for one time. So you can get up to $30 off per month for most households throughout the United States, but $75 off per month if you are on tribal land. And depending on the internet service provider's participation, you may be able to secure $100 off of a device, bringing that device down to pretty much only $50, depending on where you are. It's really fantastic. Definitely check out some of our other details and programs and webinars we have on ACP if that's something that you have questions on. Next slide. We also maintain a database of our free and low-cost internet plans. It covers not only the ACP eligible plans, which is that program I just referenced on the last page, but also low-cost plans, ones with and without eligibility requirements. And it provides all the details of what those plans are called and how they work. And we have a fantastic team behind it who take a lot of time and energy contacting internet service providers to make sure that that information is up to date and that they are providing accurate descriptions of exactly how it works. So that is what I'm covering for affordable and low-cost internet, but there are other solutions too. Next slide. We are thinking about our appropriate and affordable devices. Once again, this is where I bring up, what are those words that I'm saying? Appropriate and affordable. And for affordable, this is once again, thinking about devices that are going to be able to serve us at a cost bracket that we can handle. But what is an appropriate device? Well, let's take a look at that. Next slide. When we think about an appropriate device, it is all about figuring out exactly what it is that we or our community member may specifically need to fulfill our needs. We can look at a smartphone, a tablet, or a laptop, thinking about all of the different pluses and minuses when it comes to the specific community need. I always like to think more about who would be handling this as the best device for them. Some things about using a smartphone if you're on the go a lot, if you work multiple jobs and you need to have a device that you can take with you and connect to multiple different places. You need a long battery life. Maybe the smartphone is going to be the best option for you. A tablet can be really fantastic if you're looking for a keyboard that you can adapt to be in a language other than English, specifically one that may or may not use Latin keyboard. So if you need to type in Cyrillic or Korean or any other language or set of characters that is not standard to your usual QWERTY keyboard. It's also great for accessibility because you can really use a lot of different options, including Zooming, and there are apps to use for communication, depending on your communication needs. And I think many of us right now are tuned in on our laptops because we're at our jobs or our volunteer organizations, or we're just curious. We're here on our shorter battery life. I think most of us are currently plugged in. We are using our larger storage to download some of these resources that Pamela is sharing with us. And we know that this is kind of what we need to have to be able to do our jobs. So that is often the appropriate device for us and for our community members. Next slide. There are some fantastic programs across the country that specifically cover providing devices. And one of those is our friends at Tech Goes Home up in Massachusetts. With them, learners who complete a course can receive that free Chromebook and 12 months of internet service, really helping to meet that need and make sure that they have a device that is really appropriate to their specific needs and wants. Next slide. We also have some details on those device elements for building that long-term support for your digital inclusion program and really looking for those success stories throughout the country. So take a look at our startup manual as well. We have one more area of solutions to cover before I jump into digital navigators. So on the next slide, we're going to get started in digital skills training. Once again, a pause for those words that I am using. a couple of years ago, and I say a couple of years ago because it is almost a couple of years ago, in 2022 at our Net Inclusion Conference, we had a number of people saying that digital literacy really felt like a term that brought judgment to the digital skills space, that you were either literate or illiterate, and that there wasn't a lot of nuance or appreciation for the spectrum of digital skills when we say digital literacy, and that it can be a stigmatized term specifically for community members who come from communities of low literacy. So we started saying digital skills training because it definitely explains the experience a lot more. Just before this meeting, Pamela ran a really fantastic digital skills training for our staff on how to use Zoom to the best of our ability. And I think all of us learned something really, really critical. So there is never a point in your life in which you have achieved all of your digital skills that you need. It's really more about just figuring out what you're trying to find. So speaking of, I've got another trivia question for you on the next slide. Across industries, what % of jobs require digital skills? I'd love to see some guesses in the chat. There is no wrong answer. We've got one guess for D, 92, D. All right, I think it's time for the big reveal. Y'all know what you're talking about. According to the National Skills Coalition, their new report, Closing the Digital Skill Divide, 92% of jobs require digital skills. And I think most of us who have worked in the retail industry or in warehouses or in offices, of course, but the rest of us who have done some of those other jobs are really seeing that is our technical know-how that is bringing us to the forefront of that work, that's getting us those promotions and sort of making us into the leaders and managers that we were. For me, I worked retail for years, and I've got to say the main reason that I stayed in a lot of those jobs was that I was always guaranteed more shifts based on my ability to troubleshoot our registers, which were just PCs that were hooked up to scanners and some other things. Honestly, I could say that probably the reason I got a raise every year is because I knew how to turn it off and turn it back on again. So thinking about those foundational digital skills, on the next slide, we're going to see some of the ideas of what digital skills may be critical for adults. And it can be really hard to conceptualize just where do I get started when it comes to digital skills. So there are digital skills frameworks that take the guesswork out of what's important. How do I decide what our community members should participate in? Turning on devices, controlling them, adapting them, connecting to internet. All of these are really specific baseline digital skills that are critical to our ability to progress and become self-sufficient in our digital skills acquisitions. Next slide. We have some digital skills training resources as well, including this blog post, which admittedly I wrote, so I like to brag about it. If you're planning on building a new digital skills curriculum, if you're just thinking about digital skills on your own, stop and take a look at this because there is so much fantastic work that's out there. One of the great perks of participating in NDIA as a community and the digital inclusion community as a whole is that we are all working together and we are reminding each other that there is no reason that we have to reinvent something. We already have fantastic digital skills frameworks and digital skills resources. It's about how we use them and adapt them to our communities that make them particularly unique and special. So take those things that already exist and run with them because that's exactly what we're asking you to do. Speaking of taking things and running with them, I would like to share one of my favorite programs and shout out to my digital navigators who I did see attending today. I saw you guys log in since I sent you the link. Let's talk about digital navigators. Has anyone here heard of a digital navigator program before? You can go ahead and throw something in the chat if you're familiar with the term. If you're not familiar with the term, I'm always just curious to see what folks know. Yes, we've got some yeses. Armando, you're a shoo-in, you already know. All right, so next slide. Digital navigators provide consistent, holistic, individualized support to our community through repeat interactions. And that is a really long way of saying that they support folks getting connected to affordable broadband. They help people to get connected to and choose an appropriate device. And one of the biggest lifts that digital navigators do is really support that digital skills element. It is really hard to learn a digital skill on your own unless you are really a go-getter. Digital navigators help to connect it all together and provide not just the actual technical support, but really the social and emotional support that can take place when someone is learning something new and they are experiencing feelings of shame, discomfort, or even overwhelm when it comes to that computer or device or software. If you want to learn more about digital navigators, on the next page, we have quite a few digital navigator resources. We're going to be releasing some more. I definitely recommend taking a look at the digital navigator model. And when Pamela really plugs joining our community at the end, I'm going to say you're going to want to if you're interested in digital navigators. My colleague Abby is going to be releasing some amazing resources soon. You want to be the first one to know. But in the meantime, take a look at our skills assessment, our follow-up surveys, some of our baseline job descriptions if you're considering developing your own program, some intake forms, and the whole Digital Navigator toolkit. The thing about Digital Navigators is that while we help to develop this model, this is an open source community item. We would like everyone to be able to develop a Digital Navigator program that reflects the needs of their community and supports their community members. So please take everything we have and run with it. I think that concludes all of my sections.
Yes, thank you so much, Lo. All right, so I am going to be talking briefly about digital inclusion coalitions. So what are those? Digital inclusion coalitions, they are collective organizations in a community or even in a state where they are all of the digital inclusion programs that exist there. On the map on the right are all of the digital inclusion locations that have registered themselves with NDIA. So you can see some of them are statewide coalitions and some of them are more local coalitions. If you see one around you, near you, go ahead and reach out to NDIA and we can connect you or at least give you some more information about the digital inclusion coalition that exists in your area. And if you don't see one, you have the opportunity of creating that, right? So digital inclusion coalitions, they could create and raise awareness about the digital inclusion issues and the digital divide issues in their community, and then create funding to help support those digital inclusion programs that exist there. They bring awareness to those digital inequities that impact their community and then help with those advocacy efforts. So who is involved in digital inclusion coalitions? As you can see here, they are predominantly nonprofits, so those social service works, as well as libraries, education programs, local government workforce. It all kind of depends on that unique digital inclusion coalition of who they are allowing to be part of their coalition. Do they want to have local officials there, or do they want to have internet service providers there? It all kind of depends on the vibe and the relationship that those folks have with the community. But it really is community driven. And if you are not part of the digital inclusion coalition in your area, we really recommend you to join, just so that they are really hearing from the voices who are doing on the ground work. So one example of a digital inclusion coalition is the Bronx Digital Equity Coalition. So they were created during the beginning of the pandemic, and they partnered with organizations in their area and distributed over 2,000 Chromebooks and Wi-Fi hotspots to their students. So as you can see, this is some great work that this digital inclusion coalition does. And some of them are also part of creating and administering the digital equity plan in their state. So if the digital inclusion coalition is something that you're interested in learning more about, or let's say you are part of a digital inclusion coalition and you want to learn how to make it stronger, bigger, and better, we have developed a digital inclusion coalition guidebook where we've learned from about 25 coalitions throughout the country on what are best practices, how they've set up and structured their coalition, some stories about how they've included racial equity into the structure of their organization, and how they can adapt and succeed over time. So if you are part of a digital inclusion coalition, go ahead and share that in the chat. We love to see coalitions being represented. And as far as resources, an additional resource goes, we have the Digital Inclusion Trailblazers. So this is a public inventory of local government initiatives that promote digital literacy and broadband access to underserved residents. And last year, we named the largest group of digital inclusion trailblazers, which is 32. And so some of the things that we look for, these indicators that we look for in determining if they are a trailblazer is, does that local government have staff, a dedicated paid position where somebody is doing digital inclusion work and research? Does that state have a digital equity plan? Are they part of the digital inclusion coalition there? Have they done some type of survey or research or data collecting in their area? Do they have funding? And then do they work with broadband affordability? Awesome. And then now passing it over to Sion to talk more about policy.
Thanks, Pamela. Okay, well, I'm going to try to make this sound just as exciting as Lo and Pamela discussed. I hope it is. I will say it's an exciting time to be participating in digital inclusion efforts. Congress made a very significant effort to address multiple aspects of the digital divide. I'll focus first here on the Digital Equity Act, and I'll get into how that funding is divided in just a few minutes. But this act really recognizes first that there are certain populations that have been, historically at a disadvantage, because of the digital divide. So people who are incarcerated, people who have lower incomes, older adults, people with language barriers, people who live in rural areas, veterans, so many people that this divide impacts. And this act also recognizes, that there are going to be some unique barriers that need to be addressed. So availability, broadband availability, affordability. It touches on the need for devices and digital skills. So all of those activities are going to be supported with this Digital Equity Act funding. And then on the second bullet, Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. What's that? We abbreviate that BEAD. So sometimes you'll hear people refer to it as the BEAD program. And this is a pretty big chunk of money from the total investment amount. A lot of this is going to be devoted to infrastructure, the actual infrastructure to deliver broadband to, communities that don't have it at all, or communities who have really poor access. So Lo talked about sort of that broadband definition of 25.3. There are still communities that don't even have that level, right? So not even what we consider maybe the minimal functional speed to participate in a lot of the important activities that people do online. So that's where a big chunk of this money is going. And then the Affordable Connectivity Program. So this is a benefit, as Lo discussed, that is going to help make broadband affordable to a lot of households. Right now, there is about 17 million households enrolled in it. But what Congress and the FCC have recognized is there's still a good number of households that could enroll but haven't. And a big part of that is just lack of awareness. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. We have the Tribal Connectivity Program. $2 billion here. This is going to support, it's going to be in the form of grants to expand access on tribal lands. And then there is a section on digital discrimination. So in the Infrastructure Act, Congress directed the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, to make rules to prevent and eliminate digital discrimination. Pamela talked earlier about digital redlining. That's just one form of digital discrimination, but it's one that this act is also meant to address too, or this section in the act is also meant to address. So right now, the FCC is asking the public to weigh in and share their perspectives on how they should structure these rules to prevent digital discrimination. And they've been traveling to different communities to learn about people's experience with broadband, but they've also have been accepting public comments. And what that really means is just, there's a portal on the FCC's website where really anybody can go in and submit a letter or, perhaps even a longer document, just outlining what their perspectives are on digital discrimination and what we think the rules can look like. And If you've been on the listserv at all for the past 6 months, you've seen me in the inbox talking a little bit about what our response has been so far. And the biggest point that we really want to get across to the FCC and to the larger community to make sure that it's reflected in the rules is that intent to discriminate is not it should not be the focus of creating the rules. So for example, if a service provider decides not to bring service to a few neighborhoods, we're not going to get caught up in what the intent was behind that. We want in the rules, we want the rules to reflect that the point of evaluation is really the impact. So there could have been a number of decision considerations for that provider. We don't think that's actually relevant. The focus of the evaluation should really be on how communities are impacted by different decisions, no matter what the intent was. So we're in the process now of continuing to put on the record what our comments are on this issue. We've engaged, a working group in our community on this issue to help us put forward some positions on what these rules should look like. So it's still very much an ongoing discussion, but there is a deadline associated with it. The FCC has to come up with these rules and finalize them by November of this year, actually. So there's a lot happening. The conversation is still going, but it does have to conclude at some point. So, if you're really invested in this issue and you would like to learn more about, possibly submitting a comment yourself, feel free to reach out to me. It really doesn't have to be this really big, intimidating thing. You can submit just a few pages of your opinion, or 1 page of your opinion, or 1 paragraph. So there's a way for you to participate in this process by communicating with us, but also communicating directly with the FCC. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I talked about that first bullet, Digital Equity Act. This is sort of the way the funding is going to be portioned and what the relationship of that funding stream is going to look like. So the entity that is administering the program, NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, it is housed in the Department of Commerce. And that is the entity that is in charge of doling out all of this money. You'll see kind of on the top stream that this money is it's flowing to states. And right now, states are in the process of developing digital equity plans. So there is $60 million available in funding for states to do this. We are going to be transitioning pretty soon into the phase where there will be a capacity grant program, and that's going to help support states in implementing their digital equity plans. And then a little farther down the road, there will be open the competitive grant program. And so you'll see that there's a stream going straight from competitive grants to NTIA, because that's the funding that's not necessarily flowing through the states. It's going to be, that funding is going to be open to a variety of different organizations to apply directly to NTIA for funds to support different kinds of digital inclusion activities. But a special note I'll say about this is that competitive grant program, for example, isn't the only way that we'll see, for example, some nonprofits or community anchor institutions be supported with funding. Some of that funding is going to come from that capacity grant program, depending on how the state decides to issue grants from that funding that they get, right? So if a state identifies certain entities as being really key in helping them implement the plan, then there will be, an opportunity for that funding to be available there too. Okay, we have so many resources on this. So next slide. So if you really want to know, really get an idea of like, well, what are these plans? How are states going to develop them? What goes into a plan? How am I going to learn about what's happening? This is a toolkit we developed. And so this is something that states are actually using to help or we hope are using. And we know that many states are familiar with this plan at the very least, to help them develop their digital equity plans. And we have some recommendations in there for an outline, but also what's included in this plan are some very specific details that we know states will have to incorporate into their plans based on the guidelines established by NDIA, that entity that is administering the program. So that's where you can kind of learn all about it. There are some community engagement requirements for states. So, you know, we expect that states are reaching out to different communities as they're actually instructed to get feedback on what's in these plans. So I'm a fan of it. Not just because I wrote some parts of it, but I'm a fan of it because I think it's super, super useful and a really valuable guide. Next slide. Okay, so the Affordable Connectivity Program, this is the program I mentioned earlier that's administered by the Federal Communications Commission that's going to be providing those monthly benefits to households that are eligible. So it's $30 a month benefit for, as Lo mentioned, for most households, but that's also that $75 a month benefit for eligible households on tribal lands. If I have time, two very quick notes about this. I mentioned earlier how funding, or excuse me, knowledge of this program is kind of a challenge. There are more households eligible for this program, but aren't aware that it, you know, exists. So the FCC has supported outreach grants through the Outreach Grant Program. So there was a funding cycle application cycle that started late last year, and many organizations in different states were awarded grants and learned that they were awarded grants in March. And I can, if this is something that you're interested in, again, feel free to email me directly, because there is actually going to be another funding opportunity, not as big as the first one, but there's going to be another funding opportunity for outreach. So this slide is just talking about what the benefit is to households, but when I'm talking about the Outreach Grant Program, I'm talking specifically about a different pot of money that's meant to help organizations get the word out about this specific benefit, about the Affordable Connectivity Program. Next slide. Okay, talked briefly about that very quick bullet on the first slide where I mentioned BEAD is the acronym that we kind of use. Again, this is a large chunk of this funding is going to support infrastructure projects in unserved and underserved areas for increasing high-speed availability of broadband. Next slide. Okay. This is our resource page. So we've got, you know, at first I was thinking, oh, we don't have enough here, but it's like, oh, we have quite a bit here. So the programs that I just talked about, all of those Infrastructure Act programs, we have sort of neatly tied up into some blog posts that you can read through and learn about what those investments are and where they're going. We have webinars that we've recorded that are available on our website for the Digital Equity Act and BEAD. We have webinars and blog posts and FAQs about the Affordable Connectivity Program on our website as well. And I host a working group once a month, the second Wednesday of the month at 2 o'clock on the Affordable Connectivity Program. I know I'm probably over time and I apologize, but there's a lot of policy resources available for you all. And again, feel free to email me with questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Sion. We also have a ACP working group, so if that's something you're interested in joining, go ahead and contact Sion afterwards. And then lastly, before the Q&A section, we encourage you all to join the NDIA community if you aren't part of the community already. There's a lot of benefits to joining, and we've got, you know, free options as well. So if you join as a friend, so you are an individual working at a nonprofit, education, local government, or you join as an affiliate, so your organization is an affiliated with NDIA, then those are free, and you get access to our listserv where we have a lot of practitioners coming in asking questions, sharing resources. And then we also have our monthly community calls. For example, the next one is coming up this Friday, where we're going to have a listening session with NDIA to talk about the request for comments regarding the Digital Equity Act. And then we also have a monthly newsletter that you'll have access to. There is going to be a link in the chat of where you can go ahead and join. And if you have any questions regarding that, you can go ahead and contact me. This is our contact information for all three presenters. And we do have some questions in the chat that I want to make some time for. Thank you, everybody. And there is a few questions here, so I'm just going to start reading them from the order that we got them. So Lori asks, are the dollars for tribal connectivity separate from states dollars? Can tribes double dip from both pools?
Say that one more again. Are they different from state dollars?
Yeah, are dollars from tribal connectivity separate from state dollars, or can tribes double dip from both pools?
Yeah, so the funding for the tribal connectivity program is mostly for that. I talked about the BEAD program, that being largely the infrastructure aspect of the investment. The tribal connectivity program is sort of like the tribal version for that. So the reason why this isn't a straightforward answer is because states can participate in the Digital Equity Act programs, and depending on how they want to, and Amy would know this better than me, depending on what their partnership looks like with the state, whether or not they want the tribal organizations wanted to write their own plan or wanted to go in with the state and sort of move through that effort jointly. It's just going to look a little bit different, but that's for the plan development, the actual hard dollars for the infrastructure. Tribal communities, their main avenue for that, the infrastructure aspect of that would be the tribal connectivity program and not the BEAD program, if that makes sense. So this would be the tribal connectivity program funding. If the tribal community is looking for that, those investment dollars for infrastructure only, that is going to be the main avenue for that.
Okay, awesome. Justin asks, do you have any guidance regarding grants for technology? I'm wondering if there are resources that might make it easier to find grants we could apply for to get technology for students or classrooms.
Yeah, there is, and I think the right resource for, okay, so maybe the best answer is there's a coming soon for that. So what the grants that I was talking about with the competitive grant program, for example, the NDIA has to develop a notice of funding opportunity for that, where they're going to outline specifically what is going to be permitted for like an eligible use of spending for that program. So that is coming soon. But right now, as it stands for the Infrastructure Act right now, or the Digital Equity Act programs right now, most of that money is going to states right now to, use that to develop their plans. So I don't have on hand, like from memory, like what the best repository is to find any funding anywhere, but there is more money coming to support programs like that, what you're characterizing through NDIA programs. So we don't have the specific hard details on, who's going to be allowed to apply and what exactly that funding is going to look like, but that is coming really soon.
Okay, awesome. Logan asks first regarding the coalition guidebook, about what that inside the guidebook, what is referring to when we say formal entity, or what type of formal entity is recommended. Our executive director recommends you to look more into the information about backbone organization. And Logan, what I can do is connect you with Paulo, another program manager who is dedicated to looking into digital inclusion coalitions regarding both of your questions. Now, the second one is the coalition map all inclusive? In other words, could there be existing coalitions separate from NDIA out there that are not represented? The answer to that is that the map is coalitions that have registered themselves with NDIA. So by no means is this reflective of the digital inclusion coalitions that exist right now everywhere throughout the country. So the short answer is no. I'm sure there are coalitions out there that we still don't know about. And if you do know of coalitions, please, encourage them to, you can reach out to me so that I can, connect with them. And we want to make sure that we get them registered as well, so we can learn more about what they're doing on the ground. And I, again, will connect you with Paulo. Somebody asks, how much of the ACP has already been spent and what's the prediction on when it'll run out?
That's such a good question. And in fact, maybe the most important and pressing question about ACP. Right now, there isn't a published list of how much money exactly is left in the pot. But we do know there's a cap on how much money that there is in total. And what some organizations have done that it's been really helpful, and what we've been referencing, is building different sort of forecasting models based on different assumptions on like how many households in total are eligible throughout the whole country, and what's the rate at which people are going to be enrolling. And so the short story is, what the estimates that we've been looking at on some of these models can have funds depleted anywhere between late spring of next year to late summer. So we are in the process of really pushing an advocacy effort and supporting advocacy efforts to get more funding for ACP. So more soon on that. The program is really a foundational piece for advancing a lot of the other digital equity initiatives we've talked about. So more soon, the FCC will announce eventually when the end date will be based on the funding that's left, but we just don't know the hard date yet. We have a good estimate though.
Awesome. We put the last question is regarding putting the digital coalition resource link in the chat. So thank you all for attending our webinar. I know we're 3 minutes over, but we really wanted to make sure we got those questions answered. If you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. I will send the recording out to you, including the slides and the resources. But thank you all for the work that you do. Thank you for joining us, and hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.